The desert heat hadn't let up all day, but now as the sun bled red across the cracked earth, everything felt like it might burn clean through. Dust swirled around Rosalia Ortega's boots as she stood at the chapel doors, the wind tugging her veil like it knew what was coming, like it wanted to whisk her away before it got worse. She didn't run. She stood tall. Inside, the preacher's mouth hung open mid-sentence. Gasps froze in the thick air. Jeb Hawk Carver had just turned his back to her. Hat tilted, jaw firm, and voice louder than it needed to be, he delivered the sentence that would stick to her like dried blood. She ain't good enough for a Carver. No one moved. He strode down the aisle with boot heels loud against the wood, brushing past Don Augustine Ortega, her father, whose jaw had gone rigid with fury. He passed Sheriff Wade Cullens, who just lowered his eyes. Clara Redbird, Rosalia's oldest friend, stood frozen near the back pew, eyes wide and wild. Rosalia's hands dropped the bouquet. White wildflowers scattered across the floor like bones. She didn't cry. Her cheeks stayed dry, but her fists clenched the lace of her dress. Her heart didn't break, it burned. Her chest tightened with something raw and ancient, something no white dress or soft vows could cover. The whispers began before the doors even shut. She thought she could marry up. She ain't even got shoes that match. She's Ortega's girl. What did you expect? The veil caught on her earring as she turned, snapping back like it too was rejecting her. She ripped it free, the thread tearing with a satisfying pop. Somewhere behind her, the preacher cleared his throat, trying to restore order, but there was no fixing this kind of wreck. Clara pushed through the crowd and grabbed Rosalia by the wrist. "We're leaving, now!" Rosalia didn't resist. The whispers followed them like flies. She didn't look at the guests, didn't meet her father's eyes. She only glanced once at the door Jeb had disappeared through. Not out of regret, just to mark the direction he'd gone. So she'd never make the mistake of heading that way again. Outside, the sun was low and brutal. "I swear to God," Ross Clara muttered, practically dragging her toward the wagon. "If I ever see that bastard again, I'll hog-tie him to a mesquite tree and let the buzzards teach him respect." Rosalia didn't answer. "Say something," Clara hissed. But her voice was gone, swept up in dust and shame. She'd never begged Jeb, never lowered herself. But he'd still left her in front of everyone she knew, as if her love had been a joke he'd grown tired of pretending to laugh at. "He's not worth your tears," Clara said, softer now. He left in boots but no spine. A wagon rolled past the church, a child staring wide-eyed at her from the back. Rosalia met the girl's gaze, then slowly turned away. She would not be someone's story of pity. If they were going to talk about her, let it be for how she got back up. The Ortega Ranch stood dry and cracked at the edges of dust rock. Sand had crept into every corner. Wind chimes clinked with rust. That night, Rosalia sat on the porch rail, dress, wrinkled bare feet, swinging a chipped tin mug of mesquite tea in her hands. Her father hadn't said a word since she returned. She could see his silhouette inside, hunched over the dining table, staring at the Bible he hadn't touched since her mother passed. She wondered if he was praying, or if he was just too angry to sleep. Coyotes howled out in the canyon, like they were mourning something. She hadn't moved in hours. Then came the sound of wheels crunching gravel. A lantern bobbed in the dark as a rider approached, tall, straight-backed, and carrying himself like a man used to owning land and everything on it. His boots hit the dirt without haste, coat billowing as he stepped into the glow of the porch light. "Miss Ortega," he said. Rosalia's grip tightened on the mug. "Depends who's asking." "Don Germán Vigil." She blinked. The Vigil name held weight around these parts. He wasn't just a rancher, he was the land. Banker, cattle boss, kingmaker. a man whose handshake was as binding as court law. "I don't want charity," she said. He shook his head. "I ain't offering any." Her father appeared behind the screen door, voice like gravel. "What's a vigil doing at my door at this hour?" Don Germán removed his hat. "I came to speak to your daughter. About a proposition." Rosalia slid off the rail. "I'm listening. I have a son. Tomas. Spoiled. Bitter. Thinks ranching is beneath him and responsibility is for poor folks. He's wasting what I built, and I won't live long enough to watch it rot." She crossed her arms. "And I need him changed," he said. "Rebuilt from the ground up. And I think you're the only one who can do it." Don Augustin's eyes narrowed. "What are you offering?" "A deal," German said. "She marries him, lives on our ranch. 1 month. If she can knock the pride out of him and make a man of him, she walks with enough gold to rebuild this place 3 times over." Rosalia's mouth twitched. "What if I can't?" "Then you still walk with something more valuable than gold, your name unbowed." Don Augustin bristled. "You think you can buy her spine?" "She didn't look like she was for sale today," Germain said calmly. "But I saw the way she walked out of that chapel. That girl ain't done fighting yet." Rosalia stepped forward. 1 month won." Her father turned to her. "You're not seriously thinking of doing this. I got left like I was nothing, Papa," she said. "Let me prove that I am." Later that night, she packed in silence her mother's ribbon, her knife, a tin box of dried sage, and the rosary that hadn't left her bedside since she was 7. When dawn painted the sky copper, she saddled up alone. Her father stepped onto the porch, eyes rimmed red. "I ain't doing this for money," she said. "I know. I'm doing it so I stop feeling small." He hesitated. "If you leave now, don't crawl back when it gets hard." She looked at him without blinking. "I don't crawl." And she rode out toward the Vigil Ranch, toward a future neither promised nor safe, but entirely hers to claim. The wind carried the scent of dry cattle and sunburnt grass as Rosalia crested the last hill overlooking the Vigil Ranch. The sky was iron blue, harsh and unforgiving, much like the land itself. In the distance, white dust kicked up as ranch hands moved slow under the weight of noon. Fences ran like scars across the valley, and barns leaned with age, but still stood proud. She tugged her hat low to shield her eyes. Her horse whinnied, sensing her nerves. But Rosalia didn't pause. She nudged the animal forward, with the quiet steadiness of someone who'd already survived worse than heat and stares. At the porch of the main house, 2 men played cards, one of them with his boots crossed on the railing, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, and a smirk already forming on his lips. Tomas Vigil didn't rise to greet her. He just tilted his head, squinting, as she dismounted, eyes running over her like she was a riddle carved into rawhide. "Well, hell," he drawled, voice coated in sarcasm. "Pa said he was bringing me a problem, not a wife." She stepped up without hesitation. "Guess you'll have to do with both." He whistled low. "Got bite. That'll fade." "I doubt it," she said, planting herself at the base of the steps. "You Tomas depends. You always marry strangers." Rosalia didn't blink. "Only when they need fixing." He snorted and took a pull from the bottle. "What kind of woman agrees to marry a man she's never met?" She met his gaze cold. "The kind that's gonna teach you how to sweat." Inside, Don Germán emerged from the shadowed hallway. He looked over the porch scene like a blacksmith judging metal before hammering it. "Boy, get off that rail," he barked. Tomas didn't move. "Now." With a dramatic sigh, Tomas swung his boots down, slapped his knees, and stood. Fine. Let's hear the contract again, shall we? Don German folded his arms. 1 month. You work this ranch side by side. No whiskey, no gambling, no girls from town. If you quit, you get nothing. If she quits, she keeps the dowry. If she makes you a man, well, we'll talk about what you're worth then. Tomas laughed. Makes it sound like I'm a stray dog she's supposed to train. You've been worse, his father said. Rosalia didn't smile. Where's my room? You'll stay in the old bunkhouse, Gehrman said. Tomas stays here. You sleep apart, you eat together, and you work all damn day. Got it, she said. Where do I start? Tomas leaned in close enough for her to smell the sweat and whiskey. You sure you can handle this dust, sweetheart? I was born in it, she said, stepping past him. The bunkhouse was sparse, just a cot, a basin, and a cracked window. No mirror, no comfort. She dropped her bag on the floor and removed her gloves, hands calloused from years of work. Nothing here scared her, not even the weight of being watched. Outside, a ranch hand named Ignacio waited to show her the lay of the land. That one, he said, pointing at Tomas, who had wandered toward the corral, he's all mouth. Don't take him serious. I don't take anything without testing it first, Rosalia said. The day stretched long. She mucked stalls, oiled saddles, and learned where the well pump stuck if you pulled too hard. Tomas didn't lift a finger. He spent the afternoon whittling a stick, muttering about his boots being too clean for chores. At dinner, they sat at opposite ends of the long wooden table. Don German said grace. Tomas rolled his eyes. You look tired, he said across the meal. I look useful, Rosalia replied, biting into cornbread. He grinned, lazy and taunting. You keep swinging like that, you might knock the chip off my shoulder. I'll leave it there. You seem real attached to it. Even Don German cracked a smile. Later that evening, as the oil lamps cast golden shadows on the ranch, Rosalia stepped out to cool air and desert silence. She leaned against a post, watching the moon rise. Footsteps approached. You don't belong here, Tomas said softly. She glanced at him. You mean the ranch or this family? Both. Good, she said. Means I've got nothing to lose. Tomas stared at the horizon for a long moment. You ever wonder what it's like to be expected to fail? I live it daily. He nodded, but not in agreement, in recognition, as if they were reading the same book, just different pages. I'm not my father, he said, no matter how much he wants me to be. And I'm not your nursemaid. Tomas chuckled. No, ma'am, you're something else entirely. Before she could respond, a whistle rang out from the barn. Coyote near the calf pen, Ignacio called. Tomas sighed, pretending to stretch. Guess I'll leave that to the real ranch hands. Rosalia didn't miss a beat. Don't worry, I'll make sure it knows who's boss. She grabbed the lantern and walked off into the dark without waiting for backup. Back in the bunkhouse that night, she lay on her cot staring at the ceiling, the air thick with grit and stubbornness. One cracked tile in the corner of the ceiling caught the moonlight just enough to shimmer like a scar. She watched it breathing, slow, steady. It had started. She could feel the tension already, like two horses tied together, pulling in opposite directions. 1 month to change a man who barely respected the land he walked on. 1 month to prove she wasn't a fool for agreeing to this. 1 month to reclaim her name, and maybe, just maybe, change the story others kept trying to write for her. In the big house, Tomas sat at his mother's old desk, turning over a small, worn horseshoe she used to hang by the fire. He hadn't touched it in years. Tonight, he'd pulled it from the drawer like a relic of something he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. She really gonna stick this out? He asked. Don Germán didn't look up from his ledger. That girl's stronger than you think. She's not what I expected. That's the problem, Germán said. You never expect the right things. Tomás turned toward the window, watching the glow of the bunkhouse lamp flicker through the dark. He could still see her face in the porch light earlier, steady, unreadable, not a hint of fear. It bothered him. No woman had ever looked at him like that before. Not like an enemy. Not like a challenge. More like a mirror. The coyotes returned near dawn, but this time they didn't howl. They watched. Just like him. The rooster crowed before the sun crested the ridge, but Tomás Vigil didn't move. He lay sprawled across his bed, one leg hanging off boots, still on mouth half open, snoring like someone with nothing to wake up for. An empty bottle lay near his fingers, shirt wrinkled, hair a mess. A man proud of doing nothing. Outside the ranch was already alive with motion. Ignacio led a mule team past the barn. Calves bawled for milk. The air smelled of fresh hay and saddle leather. Rosalia Ortega had been up since before the rooster, her hands already raw from the water pump. She stared at Tomás through the open window and didn't knock. She kicked the damn door in. He shot up, blinking like he'd been pulled from drowning. What the? I said chores start at sunup, she said, tossing a pair of work gloves at his chest. You're 2 hours late. Tomás blinked, rubbed his eyes, then grinned. Didn't know I had a foreman with a braid. She didn't smile. Get up, he groaned and dropped back against the mattress. It's too early to pretend I care. Rosalia stepped fully into the room, arms folded. You think manure don't stink when you've got a gold pocket watch? Tomás cracked one eye open. You rehearsed that one, didn't you? I live it, she snapped. She walked over, grabbed the edge of the blanket, and yanked. He hit the floor with a thud and a curse. God almighty, fine, fine, he grumbled, dragging himself upright. You're gonna make a hell of a nun, you know that. She was already out the door. You've got 10 minutes to meet me in the stables, or I come back with a bucket. He muttered something unholy, but got moving. By the time Tomás trudged into the barn, Rosalia was knee-deep in straw, pitchfork in hand, moving like someone raised to sweat. Her braid swung like a whip behind her as she tossed another load into the wheelbarrow. He leaned against a post, yawning. So this is the plan, huh? You're gonna break me with chores, not chores, she said. Work, real work, the kind your daddy can't hire someone else to do. He picked up a shovel, holding it like it might bite him. I don't even know where to start. Good. Then we start at the bottom. She pointed to the far stall full of wet hay and worse. You muck that. All of it. Don't miss a corner. He stared at it, horrified. Did something die in there? Not yet, she said. But you might. She left him to it. By noon, Tomás was drenched in sweat and filth. He had hay in places hay didn't belong. His shirt clung to him. His back ached. Every time he lifted the fork, it was a battle between pride and muscle. More than once he paused to catch his breath and muttered under it, stupid. Damn. Woman. Rosalia, meanwhile, moved like a machine. Quiet. Efficient. She didn't gloat. She didn't correct him unless she had to. That annoyed him more than insults would have. You don't say much, do you? He asked, dragging a wheelbarrow outside. Nope. You're not going to praise me for surviving the stall of death. I'll clap when you do it without gagging. Harsh. Truth. Later at the trough, he splashed his face and drank from the pump. The water was cold enough to jolt him fully awake. She passed him a cloth. Don't get used to this. Tomorrow's worse. He wiped his face, then looked at her, really looked. You're different than I thought. Good, she said. Means I'm harder to forget. That night they sat at opposite ends of the porch. The air smelled of dust and warm pine. Crickets sang. Coyotes howled from the hills. Tomas pulled out a cigar but didn't light it. He rolled it between his fingers, staring out into the dark, like it might give him answers he didn't know he needed. I don't hate working, he said finally. She sipped water from a tin cup. Then stop acting like it. He paused, then chuckled. You really think I'm going to be some reformed saint in a month? No, she said. But maybe you'll learn what kind of man you want to be. And what if I don't want to be anything? She stood. Then you can spend the rest of your life watching other men live it for you. She walked off before he could answer. He watched her go, watched the swing of her braid, the sure steps, the silence. It unsettled him more than any sermon his father ever preached. In the bunkhouse, Rosalia peeled off her work shirt, revealing a bruised shoulder from lifting too much alone. She didn't wince. She'd earned every mark. She sat on the cot, brushing dust from her boots, thinking about her father's face the day she left. He had looked at her like he didn't recognize who she was becoming. And maybe that was the point. She wasn't a girl chasing love anymore. She was a woman chasing purpose. And whatever Tomas was, whatever damage and ego wrapped inside his bones, he wasn't her salvation. He was the mountain she chose to climb, just to prove she could. Elsewhere, Tomas stood at the stable door long after the oil lamp burned out. He didn't know why, but he reached into his pocket and pulled out the pocket watch his mother gave him when he turned 16. Still worked. Still ticked. He stared at it for a long time before pocketing it again. Then he looked at the barn he'd mucked half to death earlier. Maybe the stink would fade. Maybe not. But something shifted in his gut, something small and unwelcome. He didn't like feeling it. The next morning, she found him already at the well sleeves, rolled pitchfork in hand. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. But the look they shared said enough. A truce, temporary, uneasy, real. Later that day, Ignacio leaned toward Rosalia while tightening a saddle cinch. You're doing it, he said. You're wearing him down. I'm not trying to wear him down, she said. I'm trying to dig him out. Same thing in the end, Ignacio said. But he's got fight. Be ready when he hits back. She nodded once. She'd felt the shift too. Not just in him, in herself. Tomorrow would be fence repair, rough sunburn work out by the arroyo. She'd seen the splintered posts and half-rusted nails. It was the kind of labor that didn't just test muscles, it tested trust. It was where bones and tempers got tested, where pride cracked open, and where people either broke or bonded. The sun came up cruel and bright, painting the arroyo in hard light and long shadows. The land was cracked and dry, the air thick with dust and heat. Rosalia stood at the edge of the fence line, surveying the damage. Broken posts leaned like drunk men, barbed wire sagged loose, and tumbleweed had claimed what once was border. This wasn't just a chore, it was a battlefield, the place where pride would be tested plank by plank. Behind her, Tomas kicked at a dead bush with the heel of his boot. So let me guess, he muttered. We fix every post from here to Mexico today, just the ones your cattle keep walking through, Rosalia said, kneeling to check a rotted beam. Unless you like them wandering into snake country. He crouched beside her, wiping sweat from his brow. I always thought fences were like rules. Too many, and folks start looking for ways to jump 'em. She looked at him sideways. Maybe. But sometimes fences keep the right things in. He stared at her. You always talk like you're quoting scripture. No, she said. Just experience. They worked mostly in silence for the next hour. She measured and cut new posts while Tomas hammered spikes with the focus of a man trying to forget who he was. The heat beat down on them both until their shirts stuck to their backs and dirt clung to every inch of skin. At one point, Tomas pulled off his hat, stared at the sky, and whispered, "How the hell do you do this every day?" Rosalia, without looking up, said, "Because nobody else will." It wasn't meant as poetry. It was fact. And for once, Tomas didn't argue. Midday came with blistering sun and frayed nerves. Rosalia called for a break under a scraggly mesquite tree. Tomas flopped down like a man on his last legs. She poured water from her canteen and passed it over. He drank like someone who forgot what cold felt like. As he wiped his mouth, he said, "You ever think maybe you're fighting the wrong battle?" She squinted at him. Meaning, you work like hell, prove yourself to a bunch of folks who don't care. Why? Because I care. That ain't a reason. That's stubborn. She stood. It's enough for me. He shook his head. You're tougher than you look, I'll give you that. I know. He looked down, ran a hand through his sweat-matted hair. I ever tell you my mother died when I was 15? No, she said quietly. She was the only one who made me feel like I wasn't broken. After she passed my father, he looked at me like something he regretted making. Rosalia didn't speak, just listened. The cicadas sang in the pause between them. I used to sneak out to the canyon ridge just to scream where nobody could hear. Punch the ground until my knuckles bled. Her voice was soft. What were you angry at? He looked up at her, then eyes surprisingly clear. Everything. Her for leaving. Him for not caring. God for doing nothing. Me for not being enough. And then came the line that split the quiet wide open. You think you're the only one who got left behind? It hit Rosalia harder than she expected. She turned away, blinking fast. The desert wind picked up, tossing grit across their boots. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up the coil of barbed wire and started walking. They worked faster after that, not because the job got easier, but because something had cracked open. A silence not filled with resentment, but with shared weight. By the time the sun dipped low, they had replaced 12 posts, rewired the fence, and hauled back every last tool. Tomas's arms burned. His shirt was ruined. His boots were coated in red dust. But he was still standing. They reached the porch just as the first stars blinked out over the horizon. Rosalia tossed her gloves down, rolled her shoulders, and headed for the bunkhouse. He followed. Halfway there, he stopped her. Hey. She turned exhausted but alert. I meant what I said, he told her. Back in the arroyo. I know, I ain't looking for pity, he added quickly. No one's ever called me out the way you do. Maybe they were scared. He cracked a smile. Hell, maybe I was too. She nodded once. Good. Then maybe you're finally ready to be something more than your last name. He didn't reply. He watched her walk the last few steps to her door and disappear inside. That night, Tomas sat alone at the edge of the porch, watching the moon. He held the pocket watch again, but didn't open it. His hands were blistered, and it felt good. Real. He remembered something his mother once told him when he broke his leg falling off a colt. She'd sat at the edge of his bed and said, "Pain teaches, but you have to listen." For the first time in years, he was listening. In the bunkhouse, Rosalia wrote a short note in her journal, hands still aching. He showed up today. Not perfect, not polished, but present. It's a start. She stared at the page, then at the single candle flickering beside her cot. She missed her father, though she'd never admit it aloud. Missed the way their silence used to mean something warmer. But this silence, this new one, was building something. Not comfort. Respect. The next morning broke cooler. A breeze came in from the mountains, stirring the curtains and carrying the scent of wet pine. Tomas was up before the rooster this time, loading feed, his movements clumsy but honest. Don Germán stepped out and watched him for a long minute. "You trying to impress that girl?" he asked finally. Tomas didn't look up. "Trying not to embarrass myself." "About time." "Don't get excited. I'm not winning a medal. You're finally working like you want to be part of something. That's more than you've done in years." Tomas wiped sweat from his brow. "Maybe I'm tired of standing still." His father looked at him. Really looked. "She's changing you." "No," Tomas said, surprising even himself. "She's reminding me I can change." Germán nodded once, then walked off, saying nothing. But his shoulders were lighter than they'd been in months. Out in the pasture, Rosalia saddled up, checking straps and reins. Today they'd ride fence, check the rest of the boundary, maybe even chase down a few strays. Tomas mounted beside her. "Ready?" she asked. He looked out across the open stretch of land. "I don't know," he said. "But I'm here." She smiled faintly. "That'll do for now." They kicked their heels and rode toward the rising sun, the dust behind them, the road ahead not quite clear, but theirs all the same. The storm rolled in fast over the mountains, turning the sky an angry bruise. Thunder cracked like rifle shots, echoing down the valley, spooking horses and setting the cattle to low, restless murmurs. Rosalia tightened the last hitch knot on the fence post, just as the wind kicked up dust around her boots. Her braid snapped like a flag in the gust. Tomas stood a few feet behind, shirt half open, sweat streaked with grit across his chest. He was breathing hard from driving the final post deep into the clay. "You smell that?" he asked. "Rain and regret," she said. He smirked. "Fitting." They rode back hard and fast, the first heavy drops chasing them across the plain. By the time they reached the barn, they were soaked to the bone, mud caked up their legs. Lightning forked behind them like some biblical reckoning. Inside, the horses stamped and brayed as the storm crashed down. Tomas slid from his saddle and turned to help Rosalia down, but she'd already landed, shaking water from her hat. "Damn," he muttered, watching her. "You ever let someone do something for you? I do it myself, so I know it's done right. You ever get tired of being that strong? You ever get tired of pretending you're not?" Their eyes locked in the storm-lit shadows. Something unsaid passed between them, louder than thunder. But she turned away first. They stripped tack in silence, hanging saddles on hooks slick with moisture. Water dripped from the rafters, pooling on the floor, but neither moved to leave. Tomas leaned on a beam, staring at her while she brushed down her mare. "You ever trust anyone?" he asked. She stopped brushing. "I used to." "What happened?" "They left." He nodded slowly. "Guess we got that in common." For a moment, only rain answered. Then he asked, "Did you love him?" She hesitated. "I thought I did." What changed? Rosalia didn't look at him. He loved the idea of me, not the fight in me. Said I was too much fire, too much trouble. That kind of man wants a shadow, not a partner. Tomas laughed once, bitter and soft. "Sounds familiar." "You too, same song." "Different dance," he said. "Except I was the one doing the leaving. I thought I was protecting her." She looked at him. "Were you?" He shook his head. "No. I was protecting myself from who I'd have to become." He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The barn was quiet for a long time, just the rhythm of rain, the creak of beams, the low breath of horses. And then Rosalia broke the silence. You don't owe anyone forgiveness that costs you your soul. Tomas turned toward her fully now. What about second chances, those you have to earn? Later that night, the storm still clawed at the windows as Rosalia sat alone in the bunkhouse, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The fire in the stove crackled low, casting flickering gold along the wooden walls. She pulled a small tin from her satchel. Inside, folded carefully, were 3 letters. Unsent. Unspoken. All addressed to the same name, Homero. She had carried them for months, through towns and train stops, through the day she met Don German, and agreed to this insane deal. She unfolded one and read it in silence. Her handwriting had been softer then, more hopeful. But she didn't cry. She fed the letter to the fire. 1 page down, 2 left. Across the yard, Tomas sat on the porch steps, elbows on his knees, watching the storm pass. His father came out with 2 mugs of black coffee and handed him one. No whiskey in it, Tomas asked. You've had enough crutches, German said, sitting beside him. They watched the wind die slowly. Tomas took a sip. She's not like anyone I've ever known. German nodded. That's why she scares you. She doesn't scare me. Sure she does. She makes you look at who you've been. Tomas stared into the yard. What if I don't like who that is, then change? As easy as that, no, his father said. But it starts with not lying to yourself. He stood, leaving Tomas to his thoughts. Inside, Tomas closed the door behind him and took out the horseshoe again. But this time he didn't just turn it over. He nailed it above the door. The next morning, the air was crisp, the kind that only comes after a night of reckoning. Rosalia walked past the corral and paused when she saw Tomas already feeding the calves. You're early, she said. He shrugged. Figured the day starts better without a boot in my ribs. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. I'll take that as progress. He leaned on the fence, watching her. You burn all 3 too, saving the last one for a rainy day. She looked at him hard. No. Saving it for when I forget who I am. He nodded, thoughtful. That won't happen. Not while I'm around. That gave her pause, and he knew it. By noon they were back in the field, riding the boundary together, Rosalia pointing out spots that still needed mending. Tomas listened more than he talked. He asked questions. He offered to help. And she let him. At one bend in the ridge overlooking a steep drop into the canyon, they dismounted. The view stretched, wide golden brush, winding trails, the spine of the land laid bare like an open hand. I used to think I'd run off to the city, she said. Get out, start over. Why didn't you? She looked down at the valley. Because starting over doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. He nodded. I've spent a long time trying to forget. And now I think I want to remember the right way. They stood together for a long while, saying nothing. The wind danced around them, stirring dust and hope alike. That night she found the final letter still in her pocket. She didn't read it. She walked out behind the barn, dug a small hole beneath the mesquite tree, and buried it there. Some endings didn't need flames. Some wounds healed quieter. The saloon in Las Piedras had gone quiet. Not the hush of reverence, nor the calm of late-afternoon lull. This was the kind of silence that walked in wearing polished boots and bad memories. Tomas had ridden in for supplies, grain tobacco, some new nails for the gate hinges, but the second he stepped through the doors of El Lobo Rojo, The temperature dropped like someone had opened the door to hell behind him. At first he didn't see her. Then she turned from the bar. Scarlet dress. Hair piled like a crown. Lips too red, too precise. The kind of woman who never sat with her back to a room because she liked knowing who was watching. Rosalia's past had just walked in wearing velvet. Homero. He looked different. Leaner, slicker. Same eyes, though sharp and hollow. He stood beside the woman, one hand resting on her waist like it belonged there. She smiled like she'd been taught to. Tomas didn't move, but his jaw locked. "Didn't expect to see you here," Homero said, his voice smooth, almost casual. "Didn't expect to see you anywhere I wouldn't need soap," after Tomas answered. The saloon keeper coughed behind the bar. Homero chuckled. "Let go of the woman. Relax, I'm just in town for the week." "Business. Heard the Vigil Ranch was hiring hands. You applying or just sniffing around what you left behind?" "I didn't leave anything," Homero said, voice dropping lower. She made her choice. Tomas stepped forward once, slow and deliberate. "You didn't give her one." The woman in red stiffened. She wasn't stupid. Homero smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "Well, looks like someone's been filling her ears and her bed." Tomas didn't hit him. He wanted to. But something in him said this wasn't the place, not yet. So he turned, walked out. But not before saying just loud enough, "Some ghosts wear perfume and carry regret like a loaded pistol." By the time he got back to the ranch, the sky was dimming, and Rosalia was feeding chickens with one hand and holding a book in the other. She didn't look up until she heard the horse. "What happened?" she asked, seeing his face. He dismounted. Didn't answer right away. Then, "He's here." She froze. Homero Tomas nodded. "Why says business? Maybe looking for work. Or maybe just looking to prove he still leaves scars." She turned back to the chickens, dumped the last of the feed. "Did he say anything enough?" Silence stretched between them. "Are you all right?" he asked finally. Rosalia didn't turn. "I buried what he left me, but that doesn't mean I can't still feel the dirt." That night the air was thick. A heat wave pressed down, smothering. No breeze. Just the creak of wood and the occasional snap of a horse in the stables. Tomas paced the porch, restless. Inside, Rosalia sat at the table staring at the unopened letter she'd found under her pillow. No name, but she knew the handwriting. Homero had always written like he was in a hurry to be forgiven. She didn't read it. She took it out back and shoved it into the cold ash in the stove. Then she lit it. This time she watched it burn. The next morning, the storm wasn't in the sky, it was in the kitchen. Don Germán sat at the head of the table, eyes like flint. I hear Homero's applying to ride with Chavez's crew, out past Santa Fe. Dangerous men. Tomas sipped coffee. He always did like danger, especially when he thought someone else would bleed for it. Rosalia didn't speak. Ignacio did. "We should be careful. He's not here for work. He's here for her." Everyone knew it. No one said it. Until Rosalia stood and said, "Let him come." Germán frowned. "You sure?" She looked at Tomas. "Some debts don't get paid with distance, only with confrontation." Later that day, Tomas found her fixing a stirrup near the barn. He didn't speak at first, just handed her a new bolt. She took it. He said, "If I told you to leave for a few days, just till he clears out, would you, Mo?" You sure? She looked at him. He ran once. I won't. Tomas exhaled slow. I'm not afraid of him. I know. I'm afraid of what he brings back in you. That stopped her. And what's that? The part of you that thinks you weren't enough. Her jaw tightened. I don't carry that anymore. He nodded, but his eyes didn't let go. Just promise me you won't face him alone. Rosalia paused. Then, only if you promise not to fight my battles for me. He smiled a slow, tired kind. Fair deal. That evening, Homero came. Not to the house, but to the edge of the corral where he waited like a vulture, pretending to be a songbird. Rosalia saw him from the porch and walked out before anyone could stop her. Tomas stood. German held him back. This is hers. Homero smiled as she approached. Still wearing that fire like a badge. I wear it like armor, she said. Pity, he said. You were softer once. No, she said. You just liked me smaller. His jaw twitched. I came to say sorry, he said. I know I should have done it sooner. You don't get points for timing, she replied. He looked around, then leaned closer. You really think this place is you, dirt and sweat and fences? It's more me than you ever saw. I could take you away. Still could. You know that. She stepped back. I don't need rescue. I need roots, and I've got them now. He looked past her toward the porch where Tomas had stepped out, arms crossed. I should have killed him when I had the chance. She smiled cold and clean. You never had the chance. Homero's face darkened, but something in her stare told him not today. Maybe not ever. He left with a curse under his breath. That night, there were no words. Just the fire, just the porch, just the stars. Rosalia sat beside Tomas, not touching, not needing to. After a while, he said, Thank you for what? For not disappearing. I did, she said. Once, but I came back different. He nodded. I know the feeling. They sat in silence, the world wide and dark and waiting. But for now, it was theirs. The sun was setting blood red over the hills, casting long shadows across the Vigil Ranch. The kind of light that makes a man uneasy, like the land itself was holding its breath. Tomas stood in the corral, wrapping fresh leather around the grip of a saddle horn, hands working slower than usual. Every muscle in his back was tight. He hadn't spoken much since the encounter with Homero. No jokes, no smirks. Just silence and the kind of stillness that meant something was coming loose under the surface. Rosalia watched from the porch. She could feel it too. Ignacio came limping down from the barn with a rifle slung over one shoulder. We've got trouble, he said. Tomas looked up. What kind? Chavez's crew, Ignacio said. 5 men. One of them packing a sawed-off. They stopped at the trading post asking about Rosalia. Rosalia straightened. They said my name, yours and Tomas's. Ignacio confirmed. Word is, Homero's been running his mouth. Tomas dropped the saddle tool. Son of a, he's trying to bait you, Rosalia warned. Well, it's working. Don Germán stepped out onto the porch. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. You let them come. We stand our ground. I'm not waiting for them to bring the fight to our doorstep, Tomas snapped. You want me to wait until they torch the barn? Or worse, Rosalia stepped between them. Then we face it smart, not blind. Tomas stared at her. What if smart isn't enough this time? She didn't blink. Then we finish it. They spent the next 2 hours preparing like it was war. Tools were stashed, stock corralled tight. Germán loaded the rifles. Ignacio took to high ground. Rosalia fed the fire until the whole ranch glowed like a signal. Just after dark, hooves echoed in the distance, slow and heavy. 5 riders. Dust and menace silhouettes against the fading night. One in front held a torch. Another twirled a rope, slow like a threat. Tomas stepped forward, shotgun cradled in his arms. Rosalia came beside him, holding her father's Winchester. "I didn't come here to fight," Tomas said, voice low and hard, "but I won't run from one either." The riders stopped just at the edge of the yard. One dismounted, a tall man with a scar down his chin. "We heard you've been making trouble for our friend Homero." Tomas didn't blink. "Then he's lying. I don't waste trouble on cowards. We're here to settle his debt." "This ain't his land," Rosalia said. "He doesn't get to send wolves to do his barking." Another man spit tobacco into the dirt. "He says the girl's his." "She says different," Tomas replied. The man grinned. "Maybe we ask her again without you standing there." Tomas stepped forward. The hammer clicked on the shotgun. "One more step," he said, "and you'll answer to God before the dust settles." They paused. Even wolves know when to hesitate. Then the scarred man raised a hand. "We'll be back. You've got a day to think it through." They turned and rode out, slow and bitter. Inside, the house felt tight. Too many memories crowding the walls. "They'll come back," Rosalia said. "And next time they won't knock." "We need help," Germán said. "Sheriff Ortega might listen." "I'll ride," Tomas said. "Not alone," Rosalia added. "You don't ride alone anymore." He didn't argue. She already had her coat. They rode through the night. No moon, just wind and grit and worry. At the creek they paused to water the horses. "You scared?" he asked. She nodded. "But not of them." "What then of losing this? Of letting myself believe in something that won't last?" Tomas crouched beside her. "I'm scared too. But I'm still here." She looked at him. "Then promise me something. Name it. When this ends, don't go back to being a ghost." "I won't," he said. "I already haven't." Sheriff Ortega listened, chewing on a toothpick. "They haven't broken a law," he finally said. "Not yet." Rosalia stepped forward. "Then wait until they shoot someone." The sheriff sighed. "I'll come out tomorrow. But if you draw on 'em first, it's on you." Tomas nodded. "We're not looking for blood. Just to stop bleeding." Back home, they took shifts sleeping. Tomas didn't sleep at all. When the morning came, so did 3 riders, Homero among them. No posse, just himself and 2 shadows. He dismounted at the gate, hands open. "Don't shoot," he called. Tomas walked to meet him, jaw tight. "I didn't send those men," Homero said. "Sure you didn't. I told them to stay away." "You lit the fire, Homero. Don't whine about the smoke." Homero glanced at Rosalia. "I came to end this. With what flowers and regret number just truth. I was wrong." Rosalia stepped forward. "You were more than wrong. You were a coward. And you can take that truth and ride with it." He held her gaze, then nodded once. No smugness. Just something like defeat. "I won't come back," he said. "Good," Tomas said. "You won't be welcome." They watched him ride off for the last time. That night, the ranch was quiet again. Rosalia sat beside Tomas' boots, kicked up a warm wind brushing the porch. "We good?" he asked. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're starting to be." He smiled. I'll take that. And they sat in the quiet, not fearing what would come next, just grateful for what stayed. The morning came soft and strange. After weeks of tension, quiet felt like an unfamiliar luxury. Rosalia woke to the scent of coffee and mesquite smoke, the low coo of mourning doves outside her window. For the first time in months, her muscles didn't ache from fear. Just honest work. And maybe, just maybe, hope. Downstairs, Tomas stood at the stove, shirtless and half asleep, flipping cornbread in a skillet too hot. He wasn't smiling. Not yet. But something in the way he moved said he wasn't looking over his shoulder anymore. "You trying to burn the place down?" she teased. He looked over. "That's the plan. Then you'll have to move in with me." She smirked, poured herself a cup of coffee. "That's so." He shrugged. "Worked for my folks." She sat beside him at the table, their knees brushing under the wood. For a long while they didn't speak. Didn't need to. But then Tomas set the spatula down and met her eyes. "I've been thinking about staying," he said. Rosalia blinked. "You weren't already, really staying. Not just until the fence is fixed or the last ghost rides out." "I want roots, Ro." She looked away and heart pounding. "I want that too, but I need to know it's for the right reasons. What if the reason is you?" That stopped her cold. She wanted to believe it. She almost did. But something in her chest said, "Not yet." They spent the afternoon fixing a water trough that had cracked under the last freeze. Tomas did most of the lifting while Rosalia patched the leak with a mixture of tar and prayer. Around mid-afternoon, Ignacio came riding hard down the south trail, dust kicking behind him. "Mail's here," he called, handing off a battered canvas satchel. And a surprise. Rosalia opened the bag while Tomas steadied the horse. Inside were 2 letters. One addressed to German, the other to her. But it wasn't the handwriting that caught her breath. It was the seal. Government. She broke it open slowly, eyes scanning. Tomas saw her face pale. "What is it, my grandmother?" she whispered. "She left land in Sonora, and it's mine now." He blinked. "You never told me you had family there." "I didn't know she was alive," Rosalia said. "We were estranged, but she left it to me. 50 acres. A river runs through it. You thinking of going?" She looked at the mountains, then at Tomas. "I don't know. But I have to see it. I need to know what she left behind." His throat tightened. "When 3 days. I already wired the notary." That night, Tomas sat alone by the barn, carving patterns into a scrap of wood. German approached with 2 whiskeys and sat beside him without a word. After a while, the old man said, "She's got a right to go, I know. You gonna let her?" Tomas shook his head. "She's not mine to keep or release, but you want her to stay." Tomas exhaled through his nose. "Yeah. More than I've ever wanted anything." German leaned back. "Then you better figure out what kind of man she'd stay for." 3 days later, they stood at the edge of the trail, horses saddled, dust swirling like the past never settles. Tomas held the reins, heart in his throat. Rosalia checked her bag one last time. "I won't ask you to wait," she said, "but I'll want you to." He nodded. "I won't ask you to come back, but I'll be ready if you do." She reached up, fingers brushing his cheek. "I don't want promises. I want reasons." He looked her in the eye. "Then here's one: you make this place more alive than it ever was before you." She kissed him quick, hot, and final. Then she rode. Sonora was hotter than she remembered, drier, but beautiful in its own brutal way. The land was quiet, untouched. Her grandmother's house was a crumbling adobe walls painted by sun and memory. Inside, she found a stack of letters, all written to her, none sent. She read them under the fig tree, each word heavier than the last. Forgiveness, regret, hope. And then a line that broke her, "May this land be the place you heal." She walked the edge of the land at sunrise, bare feet brushing dry grass and thorn. Coyotes had come through in the night. She saw their tracks near the watering ditch, but they left the fig tree untouched. Maybe even wild things understood boundaries set by memory. The soil here was different, less forgiving, but rich if you treated it right. She knelt and let it sift through her fingers, thinking of all the women in her family who never got to claim land, only survive on it. This was different. It wasn't just hers. It was a beginning. At the old adobe's hearth, she found her grandmother's silver locket wedged between two stones. Inside was a picture Rosalia as a baby, swaddled in muslin, eyes half-lidded in sleep. She stared at it for a long time. Then she wept. For time lost, for the silence that separated blood, and for the possibility that something new could still rise from the ashes of the old. Meanwhile, Tomas passed the days carving a table from cedar, each leg shaped with careful curves. He didn't say what it was for, but Germán knew. So did Ignacio. No one spoke it aloud. At night, Tomas rode out to the bluff overlooking the Vigil land. From there, he could see miles of quiet earth, but his eyes always drifted south. He spoke to her out loud sometimes. "I hope you found peace." Other times just, "Come back." But one morning he didn't say anything at all. He saddled his horse and started south. He didn't leave a note. He didn't need to. In Sonora, the wind was warm when he arrived. Smelled like agave and smoke and wild oranges. He found her by the fig tree as promised. She wore a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, dirt on her hands, sunlight in her hair. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him ride in like it was the last scene in a story both of them had rewritten 100 times. Tomas dismounted, walked the last few feet. "Is it what you thought it would be?" he asked. She shook her head. "It's more." He looked around. "Then maybe we start here." Rosalia reached for his hand. "No maybes. Just yes." He took it. And for the first time in a long time, they didn't have to look back. They just looked forward. Together. That evening, they sat on the porch of the old adobe, a pot of beans simmering behind them, the stars just beginning to show through the lavender sky. Rosalia leaned her head on Tomas's shoulder. "Do you think this land remembers her?" He took a slow breath. "I think it remembers all of you, her, you, what she hoped you'd become." She nodded. "Then let's give it something new to remember." And in the quiet hush of twilight, they made a promise not to forget where they came from, but to build something bold enough to carry them where they were going. Rain came hard that night in Sonora. Not a drizzle, not a whisper, but a full-bellied downpour that soaked the adobe roof and turned the courtyard into mud. Rosalia stood barefoot under the eaves, watching water pour off the edge like ropes, her arms folded across her chest. She hadn't seen rain in weeks. It felt like the land was exhaling. Inside, Tomas added wood to the fire, trying to ignore how quiet everything felt, without the usual hum of chores and horses. This kind of weather forced a person to sit still, and stillness didn't suit a man who spent years outrunning the weight in his chest. He looked over at her through the open door. "Storm's coming in deeper," he said. "Might flood down by the creek." Rosalia nodded without looking at him. "Let it. Maybe it'll wash away what's left of her ghosts." Tomas stepped out into the rain barefoot, like her boots forgotten by the hearth. The water was cold but clean. He joined her under the eaves, standing just close enough that their arms brushed. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer for a while. Then I thought coming here would give me peace. Or answers. But it just makes me miss the questions. He turned to her, like what? Like who she really was. Why she left. Why she didn't write me until after she was dead. Tomas let the rain speak for a minute before answering. Maybe she thought silence would hurt less than the truth. She was wrong. They watched the storm together until the wind died down and the smell of wet earth filled the air. The next morning, they rode the perimeter of the land to check for flood damage. A few fence posts had been pulled from the ground. A small grove of wild tobacco had been half buried in runoff. But the fig tree still stood roots deeper than any storm. At the far edge of the property, Tomas spotted something half buried in the mud. He dismounted and pulled it free, an old iron brand rusted but intact. He brushed it clean with his thumb. "What is it?" Rosalia asked. "Looks like it belonged to a ranch called Las Flores," he said. "Initials match your grandmother's." She took it from his hand and turned it over. She ran cattle. Looks like it. Then maybe she wasn't just hiding. Maybe she was building something. They stared at the hills in silence. The wind picked up, and with it came the scent of juniper and ash. Tomas spoke softly. "You don't get to choose how you're remembered, but you sure as hell can choose how you live." Rosalia looked at him, eyes wet. "Then let's live it right." They started rebuilding that week. Not just the fences, but the home. Tomas sketched plans on parchment, adding a second bedroom, a bigger kitchen, a porch wide enough for 3 chairs. Rosalia cleared the fields, turning over soil with a shovel and a prayer. Ignacio arrived with lumber 2 weeks later, trailed by a wagon full of tools. "I figured you'd need muscle," he said, "and I got tired of German always winning at cards." The adobe walls echoed with the sounds of hammering and laughter and arguments about paint colors. Every day the house took new shape. Every night they sat beneath the fig tree and talked about what they'd plant, what they'd raise, what they'd become. But not everything stayed easy. One afternoon, while checking the south ridge for grazing space, Tomas came across a man watching from the trees. Thin, dusty, eyes sharp and sunken. He didn't carry a rifle, but his hands were too still. Tomas kept his voice calm. "You lost no. Just curious about what? About who moved into land that used to stay empty." Tomas stared at him. "You got a name?" The man grinned without warmth. "Benito. Folks used to call me Benny." "You got business here, Benny?" Benny spit in the dirt. "Maybe." Tomas didn't move. "Well, you just found out who you're dealing with." Benny turned and walked off without another word. That night, Tomas told Rosalia. He didn't threaten anything, but something about him wasn't right. Rosalia grew quiet. "My grandmother had enemies. If she was running cattle, she might have run on land claimed by others. You think someone wants it back? I think someone never forgave her for taking it in the first place." A week passed without sign of Benny. Then one night a goat turned up with its throat cut. No footprints, no tracks. Just a clean message, "We're watching." Tomas reinforced the gates. Ignacio sat on the roof with a rifle each night. Rosalia refused to be scared, but even she kept a pistol in the folds of her apron. The dream of a home had turned into a fortress overnight. "We can't build something if we're always defending it," Tomas muttered, pacing. "Then we don't wait," Rosalia said. "We confront it." Tomas raised an eyebrow. "You want to hunt this guy down? I want to face whatever history is trying to crawl back in." He nodded slowly. "All right. Then we ride at first light." They tracked Benny's path through mesquite and stone all the way to an old tin shack near the hills. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney. Tomas signaled Ignacio to circle wide. Rosalia stayed behind cover with a scope. Tomas approached revolver-holstered hands visible. Benny stepped out with a tin cup. "You're either brave or stupid." "Depends on the day," Tomas said. "But I don't like threats." Benny sipped his drink. "I didn't touch your goat." "Then you won't mind if I look around." "I mind." Tomas smiled cold. "Too bad." What followed wasn't a gunfight. It was faster than that. A quick draw, a missed shot, then Benny cursing as Ignacio tackled him from behind. In minutes, he was tied and furious. "Just trying to scare you off," he spat. "Didn't think you'd grow roots in cursed land." Rosalia stepped up, eyes hard. "This land belonged to my grandmother, and now it belongs to me. If you've got old grudges, take them to your ghosts." Benny stared at her, and for a second Tomas thought he'd spit again. But then something inside the man cracked. "She ruined us," he whispered. "Used this land to feed hers. We starved while she thrived." "She was trying to survive too," Rosalia said. "You had a choice. You still do." They left him at the sheriff's outpost 2 towns over with a warning. "Don't come back," Tomas said. "This place isn't empty anymore." When they returned, the house felt lighter, as if it knew the past had been faced and buried. They put the finishing touches on the porch by sunset, sanded smooth and lined with flowering pots Rosalia planted that morning. The fig tree swayed in the breeze. Laughter spilled through the windows. That night over beans and cornbread, Ignacio raised his glass. "To the house that survived rain, blood, and ghosts." Tomas added, "And to the people stubborn enough to make it theirs." Rosalia smiled, leaning into Tomas's side. "We're not done yet," she said. "No," Tomas agreed. "We're just beginning." And under the stars of Sonora, they believed it. The first frost arrived in silence. Rosalia woke before dawn to find the fields blanketed in white shimmer, as if the desert had momentarily forgotten it was supposed to be dry and hard. The fig tree had dropped the last of its leaves in the night. They lay curled at its base like old stories no longer worth telling. She wrapped herself in Tomas's poncho and stepped onto the porch, exhaling mist into the sharp morning air. Inside, the fire still burned low, and she could hear Ignacio snoring faintly from the spare room. Tomas joined her not long after, coffee in one hand, hammer in the other. He glanced at the fields, then at her. "Colds come early." "Feels like a warning," she said. "Maybe it's a reminder," he replied, "that nothing stays ripe forever." They stood there a moment longer, then started their day. Chores didn't care about frost or philosophy. The goats had to be fed. The creek had to be checked for ice. Repairs from the last windstorm still lingered half done. By mid-morning, Ignacio had started patching the north fence while Rosalia and Tomas moved hay bales out of the barn's shaded corner. The work was rhythmic grounding. But as they labored, a quiet built between them, not the kind born of comfort, but of something unsaid. Finally, as they hauled the last bale into place, Tomas straightened and said, "There's been a letter." Rosalia brushed straw from her arms. "From who, Don German?" She froze. Is he all right? He's dying. The air stilled. He didn't want us to come back for him. Said he made peace with it. Just wanted us to know. Rosalia swallowed hard. What else did he say? Tomas reached into his shirt pocket and unfolded the letter, then read aloud. You both built something out of nothing. That's more than most. Don't let my end become yours. I raised Tomas to run, but I'm proud he stayed. Proud you both did. Home isn't a place, it's a choice you make every single day. Rosalia blinked back tears. He always knew how to say it better than anyone, she said. Tomas folded the letter and tucked it back inside. I think we should go see him. Rosalia nodded. We leave tomorrow. The journey back to New Mexico took 4 days. They rode hard, cut through canyons and dry basins, stopping only to rest the horses. Ignacio stayed behind to watch over the land. By the time they reached Vigil Ranch, the sky was already graying with winter. Smoke curled from the chimney, but the house looked smaller than Rosalia remembered. Not in size, just in presence, as if something had been slowly exiting it since the day they left. Inside, Germán lay on a cot near the fire, covered in blankets. His eyes opened slowly as they entered. Thought you'd ignore an old man's wishes, he rasped. Tomas dropped to one knee beside him. I did. Germán chuckled. Good. Rosalia approached and held his hand. It felt like paper over stone. We've missed you, she said. You didn't miss much. Same sky, same soil. But you two changed. He coughed, eyes watering. You did what I never could. You stayed put. Tomas swallowed. I learned from your mistakes. That's the damn point, Germán smiled faintly. They stayed with him 3 days. No talk of inheritance or arrangements, just stories, shared meals, old memories rising like dust from the floorboards. On the second night, Germán gave Tomas a small tin box filled with receipts, photos, and a folded map. Your grandfather's, he said. He had plans to expand east past the ridge. Never got the chance. What do you want me to do with it? Tomas asked. Whatever you damn well please. Just make it yours. He passed in his sleep the following evening. Tomas buried him under the cottonwood tree by the creek, where his wife had been laid years before. No preacher, just silence and wind and the sound of birds returning for spring that hadn't come yet. Rosalia placed a stone on the grave. For every choice he made and every one we'll carry forward, she whispered. They returned to Sonora with the map, the tin box, and a silence between them that neither wanted to name. Something had shifted. Grief, perhaps, or realization. Tomas worked longer hours, often disappearing into the hills with survey tools and notebooks. Rosalia spent more time near the fig tree, tending to the roots, planting herbs, rereading the letters her grandmother had left behind. One evening, as dusk fell across the porch, she found Tomas sketching alone by lantern light. What are you building now? She asked gently. He didn't look up. A second barn. Maybe a mill if the creek stays full. She leaned against the post. You planning to tell me before it's built? I wasn't sure how long you'd be here. Her breath caught. What do you mean? Tomas finally met her eyes. I saw the way you looked at that letter, the way you talk about your grandmother. This place, it might have been her gift, but I wonder if it's supposed to be yours alone. Rosalia crossed the floor and sat beside him. You think I don't want you here, I think. He said slowly, that part of you's still deciding if this is home. She reached out and took his hand, calloused and stained with ink. You were wrong earlier, she said. Home isn't just a place. It's a choice you make every single day. She squeezed his fingers. And I keep choosing this. Choosing you. Tomas didn't speak right away. He just leaned in and kissed her slow, deliberate, full of all the words neither of them had figured out how to say. That winter was hard. A sickness swept through the valley, nothing deadly, but enough to thin their livestock and test their grit. Ignacio came down with it for weeks, and the supply wagon got snowed in 2 towns north. But they endured. They stitched the holes, boiled wild sage, shared what they had with passing riders, who left with blessings carved in their palms. And when spring finally came, it was like the earth had been holding its breath all season. Flowers burst from hillsides. The creek ran wild with melted snow, and the air tasted like oranges and rain. They planted corn, laid the foundation for the second barn, named a goat after German, who headbutted the others like he had something to prove. They hung a horseshoe over the doorway, not for luck, but for memory. And one morning, as the sun cracked over the eastern ridge, Rosalia stood on the porch, hands resting on a belly that had started to round. Tomas stepped beside her. "We ready for this?" he asked. She smiled. "We weren't ready for any of it. But we made it." He nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "We'll keep making it." And beneath a sky wide enough to carry every mistake and every second chance, they stood together, not waiting for the future, but choosing it. Again and again. Every single day. The nights were hotter than they should have been for spring. Even the wind carried heat like the desert was holding its breath and waiting for something to break. Rosalia lay awake, hand resting on the gentle curve of her belly, listening to the creak of the house. The fig tree rustled outside. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, not close, not far, just enough to stir old fears. Tomas was already up. She could hear him in the kitchen, stoking the stove, rattling pots. He cooked when he couldn't sleep, when something in him stirred too deep to name. When she came downstairs, he was staring out the window with a cup of coffee going cold in his hands. "You hear the news?" he asked without turning. "What news?" He held up a flyer. The kind that gets tacked to a saloon wall or passed through town by whisper. Oil. Someone found oil not 5 miles east of their land. Rosalia took the paper, scanned it, and felt her stomach clench, not from the child, but from the storm it promised. "They'll come," she said. "They're already here," Tomas muttered. Later that day, a man in a black vest and silver-tipped boots rode up with 2 others behind him. They carried clipboards and wore expressions that made it clear they weren't here for neighborly hellos. Tomas met them at the gate. "Beautiful spread you've got," the man said, looking past him toward the barn. Tomas didn't smile. "State your business." "We're representing interests who'd like to purchase mineral rights," the man said. "Generous offer. Fast cash. Not interested. We haven't named a number yet. I don't need to hear it." The man leaned in. "I've seen men like you, Mr. Montes. Men who think the land will love them back just because they work it hard. But land doesn't love. It yields until it doesn't." Tomas didn't blink. "And I've seen men like you, always talking like they own what they haven't bled for." The man's smile dropped. "Think about it." They rode off, dust kicking up behind them like a warning. That night, Rosalia and Tomas sat on the porch in silence, both watching the same patch of horizon. "They won't stop," she said. "No, we could sell just a piece. Keep the house, the tree." Tomas shook his head. "That's not how men like him work. They don't take a piece. They take the soul." Rosalia was quiet, then said, "Sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving. It's choosing to stay when everything tells you to run. He turned to her, jaw tight. You thinking of running, I'm thinking of surviving. Tomas didn't answer right away. I've run before. From fights, from family, from myself. But not this time. He reached for her hand. This time I'm staying. Even if it costs everything. The offers got louder. First it was letters. Then it was lawyers. Neighbors began selling. Ranchers up the road took checks big enough to leave forever. Others packed up quietly, hoping to escape without being noticed. Rosalia and Tomas refused every visitor. But that didn't stop what came next. One morning they woke to the barn door swinging loose, a hole blown in the side, the cattle scattered. Dynamite. A warning. Ignacio rode hard through the night to get there by dawn. When he saw the damage, he didn't ask questions, just grabbed a shovel and got to work. I've seen this before, he said. Back in Texas. Oil money makes monsters. Tomas nodded. We'll rebuild. Rosalia stood at the edge of the field, staring at the blackened crater where their hay had once been stacked. How many times do we have to lose something before we stop calling it home? Ignacio glanced at her. As many times as it takes. They started reinforcing the ranch, new locks, stronger gates, and a schedule for watching the fields at night. Friends from the village came to help, some out of loyalty, others out of guilt. But the baby was coming soon. Rosalia moved slower now. Her back ached. Her feet swelled. And still she pushed through, hauling feed sorting supplies, helping Tomas chart water lines for a second well. You should rest, he told her one night. She looked at him, tired and unflinching. Rest is for people who don't have to fight for where they live. Then came the fire. Late one night, the orchard lit up like a sunrise. Tomas saw it first, orange glow flickering against the windows. They rushed out with buckets, blankets, dirt, anything that could kill the blaze. The fig tree was untouched, but the grove behind it was gone. Ash and embers and smoke that choked their lungs. No one came to help. When the flames were out and the silence returned, Tomas collapsed to his knees, hands shaking. I don't know if I can keep doing this. Rosalia knelt beside him. You don't have to do it alone. He looked at her and in her face saw not just resolve but weariness, pain, love. We've built everything with bare hands, she said. If they want to burn it, then let them. But they'll have to come through us first. He touched her stomach, felt the faintest kick beneath her skin. That child deserves more than a war zone. She nodded. So let's make this place a fortress. The next morning, Ignacio left for the city. I know a judge, he said. We'll file a claim. Lock the land under our name, air and dirt and everything between. Tomas clasped his arm. Hurry! While he was gone, Rosalia drafted a letter, handwritten, careful, sharp. She addressed it to every family in the valley who hadn't sold. Called them to gather at the ranch. 2 days later they came. 20 families. Half on horseback. All with the same tired look. Rosalia stood on the porch and read from the letter. This land has raised us, broken us, healed us. If we let it be sold piece by piece, it won't just be oil they drill. It'll be memory, legacy, life. Stand with us. Not just for this land, for yours. One by one they nodded. Not all would stay. But enough. Tomas drew a map in the dirt. They hit us here, here, and here. Next they'll come through the North Ravine. A man from the back spoke. You got guns. Tomas smiled grim. We've got reason. That's louder. They dug trenches, posted watches, repaired fences with barbed wire etched with warnings, and waited. A week passed, then two. Then the silence became its own kind of threat. But they held. On the 14th night, Rosalia went into labor. Tomas was with her, soaked in sweat and fear, gripping her hand as she cursed the sky, the land, and him all at once. It took 10 hours, and at sunrise a daughter was born, tiny, pink, fierce-lunged. They named her Alma, Soul. Tomas held her tears on his face and whispered, "You're the reason we stayed." Outside, the fig tree stood untouched by flame, frost, or fear. Inside, the house felt more like home than ever, because now it held 3 hearts, beating, choosing, staying. The desert had turned green. By summer's end, the fig tree bore heavy fruit. Its branches bowed in gratitude to a season that had not broken it. Rows of corn stood proud where ash once scattered. The creek ran strong through the valley, its banks framed by wildflowers that hadn't bloomed in years. Rosalia sat beneath the tree, her daughter asleep on her chest, wrapped in a woven blanket, the color of dusk. The baby's breath was soft and steady, like the rhythm of a house at peace. Tomas approached quietly, boots brushing loose earth. He carried a letter in his hand, the edges curled from travel. His face was calm, but his eyes carried something heavier. He sat beside her, laying the letter on her lap. "From the courthouse," he said. She unfolded it carefully, stared for a long moment, then smiled. "It's done?" she asked. He nodded. "The land's ours, officially, on every piece of paper the government could print." She looked around the house, the orchard, the smokehouse where Ignacio was whistling while curing meat, the new barn Tomas had built board by board, the porch that now held 3 rocking chairs. "This place," she said, "used to belong to ghosts." "Now it belongs to her," Tomas said, gently stroking the baby's dark hair. They sat there a long time, not needing to speak. Every silence was full now of presence, not absence. The town had changed too. Some families had stayed galvanized by Rosalia's letter and the stand they'd taken. Others returned drawn by stories of resistance and the slow rebirth of the valley. A school had opened in the old chapel. The saloon served more coffee than whiskey these days. Oil men still rode through now and then, but their offers fell like dust against iron doors. And in every home that still stood, someone had a reason to stay. One evening, months later, a reporter arrived. He was young, eager, and city-bred. His boots were too clean, and he squinted against the sun, like it owed him answers. He'd heard rumors of a ranch that refused to sell, of a woman who'd turned family scars into soil, of a man who once ran and finally rooted. Tomas met him at the gate, arms crossed. "I'm not here to dig trouble," the reporter said. "Just stories." Tomas shrugged. "They're the same thing around here." Still, he let him in. The reporter spent the afternoon asking questions, scribbling notes, marveling at the way this land looked like it had survived war. Rosalia answered what she wanted, dodged what she didn't. She didn't owe anyone the full truth, not anymore. As the sun dropped, the reporter packed his notebook and turned to them. "What do you want people to know?" he asked. Rosalia thought for a moment, then said, "That staying isn't about being brave. It's about being tired of running." He nodded, satisfied. But before he could turn, Tomas added, "Tell them the land never broke us, and neither did the fire. We just stopped expecting it to be easy." The reporter left with his story, but not the whole one. That night they sat by the fire pit, as Alma played with the rocks near the porch, stacking them into little towers, knocking them down, then starting again. "She's going to be like you," Tomas said. Rosalia smiled. "She already is." Ignacio brought out tamales and cider, and the three of them ate under the stars. No music. Just crickets, the creak of the rocking chair, the soft hum of contentment. After dinner, Tomas walked Alma to sleep, rocking her slowly against his chest. Rosalia watched him from the doorway. "He used to be a storm," Ignacio said softly beside her. "He still is," she replied. "Just one I'm not afraid of anymore." The nights grew colder as fall arrived. Alma's first steps came one morning on the porch, toddling from Tomas to Rosalia, with arms flailing and laughter sharp enough to startle the birds from the fig tree. By winter, the town had planted a garden square, named it after Germain Vigil. Tomas never said much about it. But Rosalia saw him one afternoon, standing by the sign, eyes wet. He touched the carved letters with reverence, then turned away without a word. They kept building. A smokehouse became a schoolroom when a neighbor's child needed tutoring. The edge of the orchard became a burial site for animals that passed their names painted on small stones by Rosalia and Alma. And the porch was where every conversation worth having began. About history, about wounds, about what it meant to inherit pain and still decide to grow something beautiful. One crisp morning, as frost touched the ground again, Tomas pulled out a box Rosalia hadn't seen in years. Inside were her grandmother's letters. He laid them out on the kitchen table and read one aloud, voice steady. "If you're reading this, it means you came home. Not to me, but to yourself. I spent years thinking the land took everything from me. But the truth is, it gave me you, and maybe one day you'll give it back something better." Rosalia folded the letter again. "I think we did." Years passed, slowly, then all at once. Alma grew wild and sure-footed, sharp-tongued like her mother and steady as her father. She ran the trails with the sons of neighbors, picked fights, and ended them. She climbed the fig tree to the highest branch and claimed it as her own. By the time she was 10, she knew how to load a rifle, birth a calf, and write her name in 3 languages. At 12, she asked Tomas why they never left. He didn't need to answer. She already knew. It was written in the walls, in the scars, in the soil. Staying had never been the easy choice, but it had been the right one. One day, long after the fences had grown old, and the fig tree thick with age, a traveler came through the valley. He asked where the ranch was, the one that didn't burn, the one that didn't sell. They pointed him to Rosalia and Tomas's land. He found Rosalia in the field, Alma beside her, working the rows with hands calloused from seasons. "Is this the place?" he asked. She stood, shaded her eyes. "That depends," she said. "What are you looking for?" He looked around at the fields, the mountains, the sky. A story. Rosalia wiped her hands on her skirt. "Then stay a while. You'll find plenty." As he left hours later, he turned back. "What do you call this place?" Rosalia looked at her daughter, then at the horizon. "We don't call it anything," she said. "We just live here." And that was enough, because some stories don't need banners. They just need to be lived every single day, in the dust and sun, in the fight and forgiveness, in the choosing again and again to stay.